Good afternoon. I am Donnell Williams, president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the oldest and largest African American professional real estate trade association in the nation. We were born out of necessity in 1947 at a time when African Americans were denied membership in the National Association of Realtors. Our members are called Realtists, a registered trade name that encompasses various disciplines of real estate, including brokers, sales associates, lenders, inspectors, appraisers, developers, housing counselors, closing attorneys, and more. We advocate for the right to equal housing opportunities regardless of race, creed, color, and we are champions in fighting for democracy in housing. Thank you for attending this press conference, which we are hosting in response to a critical emergency, a crisis which warrants and requires the official distribution of the information that we will provide to you today. As of the second quarter 2019, the black home ownership rate stands at 40.6%, the lowest number in more than 50 years. In comparison, the home ownership rate for non-Hispanic whites is reported by the U.S. Census Bureau as 73.1%, representing more than a 30 percentage point difference and reflects the economic mountain that black Americans have to climb just to be placed on an equal level playing field. This is unacceptable. Me and my leadership team have invited you, special guests, our members, and interested consumers to officially announce that I have declared a war on the declining rate of black home ownership in the United States of America. The decline has not happened overnight, and there are several reasons and factors for which we can attribute this decline. Richard Rothstein did a thorough job of detailing how federal, state, and local governments gave rise to and reinforced neighborhood segregation in his book, The Color of Law. A significant portion of NAREB's history is tied to championing efforts that expose and rise against the decades of discriminatory lending practices and government policies that have created barriers for blacks seeking to become homeowners despite the passing of the Federal Fair Housing Act over 50 years ago. We are vehemently defending that there is value in the power of home ownership to all, as historically speaking, acquisition of real estate has been the primary wealth building tool for African Americans in our country. It has been well documented by various entities that home ownership affords blacks the ability to create savings accounts, the ability to build equity. It can be directly associated with improved health and increased life expectancy, strengthens the likelihood of mental, emotional, and financial stability. And it is tied to family members having access to better educational opportunities. In our opinion, home ownership is the key to providing everyone, regardless of race, the opportunity to experience the American dream. Today's event, the National Collaborative Conversation on Black Home Ownership, will be one that will offer solutions that will shift the tide and close the gap in the huge disparity that exists in the home ownership rates today. We will not just state the problems and challenges that African Americans are facing, but we introduce a list of programs and initiatives that I have curated since I assumed the role of president of NAREB and the commander-in-chief of black home ownership. These solutions are called the NAREB 8, and they will offer solutions that provide accessibility, affordability, and sustainability in the home ownership space. The NAREB 8 expands the reach of 2,000,005. The 2 million new black homeowners in 5 years, launched in 2015, by attacking the dismal and disturbingly low homeownership rate for blacks in a deliberate, strategic, comprehensive manner. Some of the programs of the NAREB 8 include House Then the Car, a campaign targeted to the 1.7 million African American millennials and Generation X populations who make over $100,000 per year and who do not currently own a home. And Civic Engagement, a program that identifies and cultivates a host of allies in this war that expand beyond established networks and partners of faith-based communities. These allies would include Black Chambers of Commerce, Greek organizations, Masonic organizations, minority professional organizations across the country. Today, we will also discuss legislative policies and programs that will support our efforts. One such program is the Housing and Urban Development, referred to as HUD's American Dream Down Payment Initiative. With this program, funds may be used to assist low to medium income families to become homeowners by financing acquisition, construction, and rehabilitation of the property. Another important policy would be to introduce some and reintroduce to others one that provides a viable solution to home ownership to Native Americans called the Section 184. Indian Home Loan Guarantee Program is a home mortgage product specifically designed for American Indians and Alaska Native families, Alaska villages, tribes, and tribally designated housing entities. Congress established this program in 1992 to facilitate home ownership and increase access to capital to Native American communities. With Section 184, financing borrowers can get into a home with a low down payment and flexible underwriting. Section 184 loans can be used both in on-off Native lands for new construction, rehabilitation, purchase of an existing home, or refinance. Section 184 is synonymous with home ownership in Indian country. Clearly, this program is not one established for African Americans. But we would like to raise the questions, why not? Today's purpose-directed dialogue will not just be dialogue. NAREB and its partners and supporters will be taking action. We will use our weapons to attack and defeat the aforementioned problem. The conversation starts today. Our strategy is to educate, empower, and mobilize. With that being said, I would like to bring before you 4 individuals who represent allied supporters who are fighting alongside NAREB in this war against the decline of black home ownership. They are leaders in their own rights who will articulate and reiterate the problems and challenges that we face that validate the need for war, and who will offer solutions to be victorious in this war. First, I offer you Professor James H. Carr, Endowed Chair and Professor in Urban Affairs at Wayne State University and Chief Curator of NAREB's annual State of Housing in Black America report. Mr. Carr, please approach.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the National Association of Real Estate Brokers for allowing me again to be the lead author, and with a fabulous team that I work with every year to draft this year's State of Housing in Black America. It is a real honor, so thank you, Donnell. I'm going to go through some notes in a very organized way, mainly because if I don't, I'll start ad-libbing, and it'll be 3 o'clock, and it'll be the end of the program. Everyone who knows me knows that's true. So let me just run through a few things, because it's a story that really requires a very methodical understanding. As Donnell pointed out, we've lost an entire percentage point in homeownership just within the last year, and that is quite remarkable. It's remarkable not that we've lost all the gains from homeownership since 1968. It's remarkable because the homeownership rate today is actually lower than it was in 1968. Now, the reason that is really important is because In 1968, blatant housing discrimination was allowable. So you could actually just say, no, we don't lend to blacks, or we're not going to show you this house, and there was no penalty. So then how can the black homeownership rate be lower today when blatant discrimination practically doesn't exist? That's not to say that discrimination doesn't exist, but people know, for the most part, in the banking and real estate industry, you can't just say, well, I don't lend to blacks, which means the forms of discrimination and bias are much more subtle and much more difficult to challenge. Now, I wish that was the worst thing that I could say about the homeownership rate, but it's not, because the actual gap between homeownership rates between non-Hispanic whites and blacks is actually higher today than it was in 1968. It's actually higher than it was in 1934. Now, 1934 was the launch, you can consider it, of the modern housing finance system. And that is when the enactment of the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, Fannie Mae, Federal Home Loan Corporation, and the Federal Home Loan Bank system were all put together. What this means is that as the gap was growing, it's a reflection of the fact that non-Hispanic whites who had access to that modern housing finance system were able to leverage it substantially, growing their homeownership rate to a full 76% before the housing crisis, and now settled back to just a little over 73%. The gap has been because historically, blacks have had to rely on a whole host of predatory, excessive price, exploitative loans, and so it's created a foundation that was not sustainable. Now, Donnell mentioned the book that by Richard Rothstein, who documents historic discrimination. But here's a really interesting point, and we point this out in the report. It's fascinating. It's common sense. We all know it, but we don't necessarily think about it. This decline in home ownership has happened at a period in which we're experiencing a relatively strong economic expansion. As of right now, black unemployment is at a historic low, and it's been bouncing around historic lows for the last almost a year. Wages are rising. The gap between black and white labor force participation has narrowed. And for those middle and upper income blacks who have 401k plans, they've seen substantial increases in the stock value of those plans. So in other words, this is another way of saying the economy doesn't explain black home ownership, because if it did, we would see black home ownership rising. And some research has shown that there are about at least 1.7 million black millennials who are currently able to buy or qualify for mortgage loan. So the question is, why does the drop keep on happening? Research has shown that between 17% and more than half of the disparity in home ownership rates is due to something called unexplained factors. And historically, we've thought about those unexplained factors basically as just discrimination, the kind that Richard Roth points out in his book, The Color of Law. But it's important for us to really recognize that that is not the only reason for the disparity, and it is in fact driven by federal policies, as much as it was in 1968, where discrimination was legal. And why do I say that? Let's start off with failure of the financial institutions to rein in predatory loans. All financial regulators were aware of the subprime lending to exploitative loans disproportionate to black households, and blacks were already facing a foreclosure crisis long before it almost imploded the entire housing finance industry. When the federal government decided to enact financial support to help individuals deal with loan modifications, guess what loans were not included? Private label, subprime loans, the loans that were the epicenter of the foreclosure crisis and disproportionately peddled to communities of color. The only loans that were eligible were the loans from the conventional market, disproportionately non-Hispanic white. They were already the most safe, secure, affordable loans, and they had not just the Home Affordable Modification Program, they also had access to HARP. So if you just wanted to refinance from your 6% to your 2.5% or 3%, you could do so. Blacks who were trapped in 8 to 12 to higher interest rates were just stuck. So it's not surprising that the black homeownership rate falls. It's really important to understand how public policies actually drive our homeownership rate. But it didn't stop there. While we were bailing out the banks and offering them 0% interest rates, we actually assessed an extra fee if you wanted to buy homes in distressed communities. Again, disproportionately communities of color. And so it was called an adverse market impact fee. So while we were pumping liquidity into the banks to prop them up, we actually said to home buyers in black communities that we're struggling, if you want to buy a home here, it's going to cost you more. The next thing they did was they changed the form of pricing to something called loan level pricing. Well, average cost pricing prior to the recession and going all the way back to the initiation of the mortgage finance system had worked well for non-Hispanic whites. They averaged the cost of all the risk divided by the number of borrowers, and everyone paid more or less. There were some differences, but they were minor differences. After the crisis, in which blacks had been exploited, driving them further into economic distress, the federal government decided, well, in the conventional market, we're going to charge based on individual borrower financial capacity. What's wrong with this? Because that builds on historic discrimination that has taken the financial power away from black households. And so now that discrimination has stripped blacks of their financial capacity, we're now going to charge you an extra fee for the damage that we caused. I could stop right there, but I won't, because it just keeps going. In addition to charging loan level, the federal government decided to use Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as piggy banks, and therefore paying for deficit reduction, which is why there was this thing called the Treasury Sweep, which can be seen as another way of a hidden tax for homeowners. But if you're charging at the individual borrower level, then you are regressively taxing blacks. Not talked about very much. And then the final piece is outdated credit scores. This has been debated so far that I believe the first time FHFA said they were going to look at using more sophisticated credit scores was way back in 2015. In 2015, they said, we'll study it and ask the agencies to give us some sense of the impact. Well, it's now 2019, and what the agency has simply said is that we're going to be more thoughtful about how we potentially allow, I wish I had the language to explain, bottom line is no change, right? No change. Then the next thing that we pointed out is that due to the importance of homeownership, the title of this forum is Net Wealth. It's not surprising, and I hope you will take the opportunity to look at the report. You will see this gaping divide growing between blacks and non-Hispanic whites in terms of wealth disparity. Now, in the report, as Donnell mentioned, there are numerous proposals, and also we've highlighted some of the successes that NAREB has had in the face of a falling homeownership rate, because just because the homeownership rate has fallen doesn't mean that NAREB and their lobbying and their outreach activities haven't been successful. The problem is they can't overwhelm the power of financial institutions that are still pursuing biased policies against blacks that are equally destructive to those explicit discriminatory practices of the 1940s and 50s. So with that, I'm going to conclude, because I've been given the turn off here, and Donnell said you said too much. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. Truly appreciate you and your efforts and your hard work. We're going to move over into our faith-based community. Now, next up is a young man who is the presiding bishop of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship International, an organization of which NAREB has an active MOU for our faith-based initiative. He'll offer the perspective of how faith-based organizations can be a gateway for identifying and converting renters into homeowners. Bishop Joseph W. Walker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is really a delight to be here today with NAREB, and of course, I am incredibly excited on behalf of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship. We believe it's just it just makes sense. The church, the black church in particular, has a remarkable responsibility. It is good stewardship. It is socially responsible for us to do more than just galvanize people together for worship experiences, but to actually allow what we preach to manifest in their lives. Homeownership is really a right for all of us, and we are grateful for this partnership with NAREB, because in Full Gospel and many of our partners around the world, we just believe it's important for faith-based organizations to take the lead. Folks in our churches, one, need literacy. Often the reason why homeownership appears to be inaccessible is because people don't understand the rules of the game. And so I have a unique opportunity, if I may, and I'll just be about 30 seconds, I promise you, to kind of operate in the ambidextrous kind of vocation, not only as presiding bishop, but I also serve on the board of the oldest African-American bank in the United States, Citizens Bank and Trust in Nashville, and also chair the Tennessee State University Board of Trust, which all of these millennials, all of these young people who graduate, who are looking for homeownership, it's a pipeline for us in the faith community to say, you know, homeownership is possible. It's available to you, but it's all about access and it's about education. So for us in the church, we believe that programs like NAREB, they've come in and partnered with us in all of our churches, and we're setting up this whole idea. People can come in, get the information they need, and actually see deliverables. For us, it's about deliverables, and we appreciate the partnership. Every pastor, every leader, and of course our friends in AME Church are here today, and others who are partnering with NAREB. This is so important, because if the church doesn't get behind it, it really won't matter in our community, because our faith-based communities are where people galvanize around these issues, and we're incredibly excited about the potential. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this, and I'm just a small piece of this larger puzzle of helping to move this needle forward, and we're very excited. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Bishop. I personally want to give you thanks for your hard work and your efforts with NAREB. Next up, last but certainly not least, I would like to bring up a young lady who is DC's top producing real estate agent and a Realtist member. She's an industry influencer, an investor, and a public speaker. She is a millennial who is laser focused on Black millennial home ownership, Ms. LaDawn Stokes.
Thank you, thank you. I am honored to be here today, and listening to what everyone has said has really resonated very deeply with me on many levels. I have launched my own personal mission called 1K Homeowners to get into the trenches in order to educate the community. The DC Metro, I'm licensed for Washington, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and the DC Metro, as we all know, is one of the most affluent market centers for the Black community. And myself, as a millennial, representing my demographic, we outnumber baby boomers. There's more of us than baby boomers. So in order for us to shift the wealth gap, I think that we need to mobilize millennials in order to getting educated, because we need to get in the trenches and start really holding people's hands and helping them understand what the importance of homeownership truly is, which most of us in this room, I'm sure we all understand that real estate is the pathway towards wealth. For 90% of the world's millionaires have made their wealth building through real estate. Something for my personal demographic and being a millennial is that I noticed that there's a shift in an internal piece. Millennials, we don't value real estate. We don't value wealth building that way. We have our priorities based on more superficial aspects. The Black community is a trillion dollar community. We do the most in consumerism, and we also keep our dollar in our community a statistics of 72 hours. I have made it a personal mission in order to educate millennials on what the power of homeownership is. I received my first house last year, and as a first-generation American, thank you. As a first-generation American, that was not a conversation that I had in my family. We work very hard as Jamaicans. I think everybody has heard that joke, you know, how many jobs do you have? You have 5. So And I definitely do that. I still stay true to that. But with that being said, Caribbeans, Africans, and African Americans, whichever root that you do resonate deeply with, it is a conversation that we not only need to have in schools, in church, in our families, with our friends. I am also a military veteran for the U.S. Army, and so launching a war on this topic goes deep with me. I just finished 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. So launching a war on this is strategic. And the only way that we can accomplish this goal is by hitting it at every single angle and being relentless and not stopping and making this an ongoing conversation, because this is the last frontier for us to hit as a community. So I've said my piece.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for embracing the vision. And I'd like to thank you all for being here. Again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. We simply cannot overemphasize how important your participation in this event is. With your support and your reach, we can work collectively to deliver our message and implement our strategy to educate, empower, and mobilize our community. This is a first-time event for NAREB. We appreciate you all coming down here to have a press conference, to actually sit down in a room and address it. We're going to have lunch, then we're going to follow up with a national conversation with folks around this table. This is not the first time. This is the first time, but we're going to take this actual picture and come to your community with it. We're about to impact millions of lives, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Williams. Thank you to our esteemed speakers for the press conference. I'm going to ask that we transition now into lunch. But before we do that, I'd like to have our bishop, who's walking in now, Bishop Craig Worsham, out of California, to come and bless the food and to bless this event, okay? You ready to eat? All right. Thank you, Bishop Worsham.
Thank you, Jill. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you for this room that is filled today with brilliant minds. We thank you for the vision of our president who has brought us together this day. We thank you in advance for the synergy and the strategy and the results that will transform our communities economically and that will cause wealth to overflow in households across America. For this meal, we give you thanks for the nourishing and strengthening of our physical bodies. In your name we pray. Amen.
If I could have the panel participants come and get a quick picture for a photo op, I'd appreciate it, and lunch will be served. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know you're in the middle of some lively conversations. You've had some good food. We're going to get going with the second half of our program. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to the National Collaborative Conversation on Black Home Ownership. You are in the room. This is our first event. Has it been a success so far? Amen, amen. Good afternoon. I am Jill Forte, the Strategic Communications Manager for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. We welcome you to this wonderful event. The goal is to create an environment where our panelists and our guests, that would be you, will engage in fruitful, purpose-directed, and collegial dialogue around our organization's most prominent topic, the decline of Black home ownership. Thank you for your attendance, interest, and concern, and thank you in advance for the action steps that you will take to eradicate this problem. Without further ado, I would like to call our esteemed conversationalists to the table one by one, where the magic will happen. First, Ms. Lisa Mensah, President and CEO of the Opportunity Finance Network. Please. Just find your name. They're kind of turned around, aren't they? Okay. Mr. Robert E. Finn, Director of Policy and Research, the Center for Community Progress. Mark Whitlock, Doctor of Ministry, Senior Pastor, Reed Temple African American Methodist Church. James Winston, President, National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. We have some heavy hitters here today, y'all. James L. Davis, Presiding Bishop, Second Episcopal District, African Methodist Episcopal Church. I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret. I'm a PK of an AME minister, so I feel real comfortable. Third District, how about that? Tristan Bro, Director of Policy, National Housing Conference. Kim Saunders, President and CEO of the NBA, the National Bankers Association. I fooled y'all, didn't I? Charles Steele Jr., President and CEO of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He told me I was his new best friend. My homie from the ATL. Joseph W. Walker, Presiding Bishop of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship International. Lisa Rice, President and CEO of the National Fair Housing Alliance. Ben Chavis, President and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. He's not here yet. Sorry, I didn't think so. Sorry about that. Antoine Thompson, our very own National Executive Director of National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Michelle Calloway, Madam Chair, Board Chair for National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Professor of Sociology of Georgetown University. And last but not least, the man of the hour, our 31st President of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, Mr. Donnell Williams. Everyone, please, you can do better than that. Let's give our guest of conversationalists a hand.
Good afternoon, everyone. I bring greetings to you on behalf of my beloved organization, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, or NAREB as we call it, for which I am the 31st National President. Thank you for Thank you for coming to this event today. Each and every one of you are important, and your voice, opinions, and thoughts are respected and welcomed. You being here has brought one of my dreams to reality, as I have envisioned hosting this event for many years. Here today, September 10th, 2019, we made it happen. We are here to address my cease and desist order and to officially announce that I have declared war on the declining homeownership rates for blacks in the United States of America. The percentage rate of 40.6 is beyond disturbing, beyond troubling, beyond subpar. It is absolutely unacceptable. But none of my words, concerns, or complaints would mean anything if I did not come to the table, figuratively and literally, without solutions and allies. And that is why we are here today, to establish the issue, address how we got here, explain why we cannot stay here, and to bring strategies and tactics for moving beyond here. We pray that this conversation is embraced and replicated around the country I wish I had been able to have these types of conversations in my home and within my sphere of influence as a young person. But we cannot lament over the past. We are here now and we have work to do. It is NAREB's charge to educate, empower, and mobilize its members and supporters to move the needle on the decline of black home ownership, effective immediately. The conversation begins now. I will now turn the mic over to Brother Dr. Michael Eric Dyson to assume his command as the moderator and lead conversationalist at this event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President. Well, what an honor it is to be here today. I can't think of a more pressing problem than to address the fact that black home ownership is at 40.6%, and white home ownership is 71.3 or above. And when you think about that disparity, that's not because black folk don't want to own cribs, right? The vernacular for home, in case those of you are outside the parameters of the nomenclature. And when you think about the centrality of housing as the predicate for citizenship, remember that in the arguments at the beginning of this nation and the Lockean liberalism that undergirded our political contract, the notion was that a white male homeowner could be the citizen of the nation. So that in the sense of looking to the history of America, home ownership has been central to the definition of citizenship from the giddy up. And when you were owned in somebody's home, as opposed to being able to own a home, when you were part and parcel, woof and warp of the ownership strategy of another, then it's a problem. And we know it's difficult for America to grasp hold of this. Y'all have seen the results of the 1619 project, both at the New York Times and Washington Post. Folk lost their minds. Jiminy Cricket, what's going on? We can't believe it. Why would you do this? This is politically correct. No. What it is the fact that we live, as Gore Vidal said, in the United States of amnesia. And we refuse to acknowledge the history of this country and the centrality of black folk to it. So when we talk about home ownership, let me say this before I get to the kernel here and open it up to this brilliant panel. Think about the way in which returning soldiers from World War II got the hookup in terms of the GI Bill. Few black folk got it, very few Latinx, mostly white men and white women. And when they came home from war, what did they get? They got a few points on a test to be able to compete for education. That's the first hookup. They also got the hookup when it came to getting a job. This is a war veteran. Oh my God, let's hook him up. Let's give him some extra consideration. And thirdly, what did they get? The white picket fence. So when you got a job, when you got a house, and you got a school seat, that is the holy trinity of what we would term affirmative action. All we saying, can we get that too? Can we get that hookup as well? It wasn't called affirmative action then. Read the sociological analysis when affirmative action was white. When it was white, it wasn't even known as affirmative action, because white brothers and sisters have not been taught to see themselves as the beneficiaries of state projects that gave them the leg up without their vaunted engagement in meritocracy and competing over what they wanted to have as a result of their skill. You had no skill, you had the right skin, and that provided opportunity. Fast forward to the fact that in 1968, the Fair Housing Act is put into effect, right? The holy trinity of civil rights legislation. 1964, Civil Rights Act. 1965, Voting Rights Act. 68, in homage to King's death, pushed through by LBJ, the Fair Housing Act. And then not long ago, under the Obama administration, what happened? Lenders were dealt a huge blow because the Fair Housing Authority, that act, the critical portion of it, was upheld by saying there's disparate impact. Even if you don't intend to be prejudiced and discriminatory toward a particular homeowner in terms of race or class or region or religion or gender, it still takes effect. In other words, my pastor used to tell me, a mosquito don't intend to give you no disease, it just wants some blood, but it could give you malaria. Intentionality extract blood, consequence, disease. So intentionality does not exhaust consequence. And the Supreme Court miraculously upheld that. So when we come now to the fact that black people are being discouraged, we know redlining was outlawed, wink, wink, nod, nod, supposed to be, right? We live in Washington, D.C., at least I do. And when you want to talk about the gentrification of our neighborhoods, now they got go-go music. White folk, my God, what's that? Turn that Chuck Brown down, right? We don't want to hear that. Take their dogs to walk on campus at Howard University, and mad that you say, bring your pooper scoop, and this ain't no dog park. They say, well, just move the university if you don't want us here. This is the arrogance and insubordination to democracy of white supremacy, which we see echoed in an address here on Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know which one. So what's interesting to me, right, but we're going, politics aside, the importance of convening this under this brilliant president and these great interlocutors is for us to talk about black home ownership. As Dr. Carr brilliantly presented to us, that's the key to so many of us. Getting a job, getting a social security card, getting a voting rights thing, what your address is. Having ownership of your home so that you're able to participate in the larger circle of American privilege and the American dream. And getting that loan is critical. And the bleeding off of black wealth, the greatest bleeding off of black wealth with this subprime mortgage scandal bled billions from African American communities. And so now here we are at 40.6% owning our homes. I'm so glad that NAREB is engaged in the systemic analysis of prevailing forces of oppression that subvert, undermine, and distort our capacity as citizens of this nation to have a part of that American dream. So I welcome this panel to answer, thank you. And welcome this panel to answer many of these questions. And let's just say a word, you know, to ourselves and think about those Bahamian brothers and sisters being blocked out. Again, homeless because of white supremacist practices here that disallows their entry. First it's the Mexicans, then it's the Puerto Ricans, then it's the Muslims, then it's the gays, and it's us again, right around the black folk. The refusal to acknowledge our humanity is part and parcel of the project to deny us legitimacy as citizens and even ultimately a place in this American society. So we are empathetic to those Bahamian brothers and sisters who have been homeless, along with those who were rendered homeless who were Puerto Rican by an American nation that builds upon black labor, extracts black genius, but refuses to acknowledge black humanity. So, opening up, I just want to throw out a couple of questions. You know, we get real philosophical and theoretical here, but everybody sitting around this table, I assume that you own home. I know we got some great bishops, and I don't know if they have parsonages and if they got their own crib or the church is trying to hook them up and trying to put you out when they want to put you out. So hope you got a second home in the Bat Cave. But what's interesting, okay, I'm speaking from experience. Forgive me for that bitterness. I was trying to ordain 3 women back in 1983. The church uninvited me, right? Gave me a month to get out the crib. I know the importance of home ownership. I'm just saying. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child. Y'all know what that is. Y'all know what that is. That's the Billie Holiday effect of black ownership. So when you all had homes, you're all smart and lawyers and professors and preachers and potentates and bishops. But when you got your first home, did you really know all the stuff you should know? Were you as sophisticated in terms of the nuts and bolts of home ownership? Let's just very briefly go round robin around the table so that people can weigh in. Just very briefly, 20, 30 seconds about your first experience and really were you aware of all the things you should have been aware of in owning a home? We'll start here to my right over here.
I would say for the most part, I'm a banker. So in terms of the lending process, yes, I was comfortable with that.
Right, wrong person to begin with. All right, you could have played along. You could have played along. You could have said, yeah, I kind of didn't. I'm a banker. I steal people's homes. I don't get mine taken. Oh, she went to Wharton's. Oh, my God. Get her off the panel. All right, yes. Start with some preachers, man. They ain't got no crib. Okay.
Let me redeem myself.
Yeah.
In terms of taking care of a home and all
Right.
the responsibilities associated with that.
Right.
I'm still struggling through that.
Thank you for your condescension. Thank you so very kindly. Yes, ma'am.
I was a nonprofit executive. My husband was a lawyer, and we still needed help in understanding the intricacies of what we were taking on. We still needed help.
Right.
And we got support from his law firm, and it's still hard.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Better answer. Thank you very much.
I feel like I want to pass.
I own 5 homes. I got 7 of them in the first. Okay, what happened?
I want to pass. When I bought my first home, I was the president and CEO of the Toledo Fair Housing Center.
Okay, we don't want to really hear from you.
And we don't want to hear from me.
You better know. No.
I better know because I investigate the housing industry for a living and work on housing policy. But for that reason only, I was comfortable with the process. But what I will say, Kim, to your point, is that because I had a lot of connections in the insurance and real estate and lending sector, it was easier for me, and that is a support mechanism that the average person does not have.
All right. Thank you so much. Brother Van.
So I bought a home on the west side of Jersey City where I grew up in 2004.
He said where I grew up.
Where
Unless
I grew
y'all
up.
trying to dog me. I'm a light-skinned black man.
Not that much. But I bought a house in the craziness of the run-up to the housing market exploding. And
Right.
so I feel like there are so many folks who have been victimized by that process. Obviously, from where I was sitting, not even remotely close to being victimized the way other people were, but I got at least a small taste of you need to buy, because if you don't buy now, you'll never be able to buy.
Right.
And I'll take whatever terms you're offering me. And
Right.
I know the terms that were being offered to me were a lot better terms than were being offered to a lot of people. So.
Right. Thank you for that. The white man provided us an example. It was hard, not as hard as for black people, but it was tough. If it was hard for the white guy, you know what it is for us, right? When they sneeze, we have pneumonia. When they have pneumonia, we're in the casket. So thank you for that testimony, Brother Penn. All right, yes, sir.
It's gonna be like this.
Ooh, this is gonna be a hard hour.
So Tristan.
So, as a millennial, I have 2 situations. I inherited my grandmother's house, which I never intended to live in. Oh dear God, no. In South Carolina at the age of 19, and it was right up in going into the crisis, and all of the offers that a lot of African Americans were getting, I was getting, but I had individuals who taught me or were saying, okay, don't think about the equity, don't think about what I was seeing zeros I had never seen before. And I had advisors to teach me that hold on to it. I know you don't want to live there, but God bless a black man that has something with his name on it. And I still have it till today. It's a house that my cousins and we use for family reunions and everything. On the other side of it, as a millennial, the misnomer that I've seen is the 20% down payment. And it is, I don't have enough money for a down payment. I'm not even going to start thinking about a house. And so I think that that is the misnomer that a lot of millennials have. It's just that I got to have $40,000 in the bank when I barely have $40 in the bank sometimes to be able to afford a house.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. Millennial projection. Although I will say, 19 years old buying your crib, millennials, tough out here. Hard out here for millennials, inheriting a house at 19. Yes, it's real tough. I can't get my Facebook password to work. But God bless you for the toughness of your persistence, you know.
I had a pass.
Can we get some old broke Negroes who done? Damn, that's all I'm asking for. Some pity stories. So far, we're running out of luck. All right. Let's go to the bishops. That's right. All right, my brother. How about you?
So my experience is a little different. So when I grew up, we moved a lot. You know, we moved a good amount, probably about 5 or 6 times, and so we moved a lot. So when we actually owned a house once and we lost it, then we started renting again, and so then we moved one more time before I got out of college, and so when I was 33. We finally bought a house. We had looked for 3 years. I was involved politically in Buffalo, so that had some benefit. But we were also on the cusp of the crisis. About 2 years before the crisis, we got our house in 2006. Looked for 3 or 4 years. It was hard. We couldn't figure out which neighborhood. And also in the city, it's always hard. You know, black people get denied loans at a very, very high rate. Even though my wife at the time worked at a bank, that doesn't mean it's always easy because you work at the bank. That's a whole nother conversation. So we made too much to get it. We made too much to get qualified for a down payment assistance. So we were able to get some money from her father towards our down payment. We put the rest together, and the rest was history. So I'm sorry I don't have as lovely a story as everybody else.
That's all right. Borrowing from your father is great. Yeah. Yeah, he probably charged you a lot of interest to get that cash back. No, that's very great. Moved several times. I won't imply what you were doing when you were moving. I'm sure it was legal. So, great story. Brother Williams, you want to chime in?
The first house I bought was in Morristown, New Jersey. I was fortunate enough to buy a 2-family, or smart enough to buy a 2-family house. But did I know everything, all the nuances? No, I did not. And if it wasn't for my hero, my dad, coming over there and fixing the pipes and doing the floors and helping the roof and fixing the garage, yeah, I would probably be underwater.
Very good. I'm glad black men are emerging as heroes here. They say we're absent, but here we are buying our kids' homes or fixing them up. I love that story, really. Those are important, you know, humor aside. Bitterness that I didn't have the possibility of borrowing money aside. That's a tremendous importance as well. Yes, ma'am.
So I was not able to borrow money from the family. I'm a New Yorker and transplanted to the South. So as a New Yorker, I was an apartment dweller my entire life. So there was no conversation ever about buying a home. So I didn't think about ever being able to own a home until I moved to the South, Atlanta, where black folks were doing a little bit better in terms of home ownership back then. And it was a realtist. I'm not saying this because I'm a chairwoman of the board, but it was a realtist that showed me about buying a home. And even with that, it was limited. I didn't know anything except for get a second job and save money towards an FHA loan, 5% down payment. There was no down payment assistance then. And it was that black real estate professional, realtors, that took me by the hand and said, "You're an apartment dweller, you can't own a home." So it really took someone grabbing me by the hand to give me education. And I didn't have anywhere to borrow, from, so I had to get the job to do it. It was that realtors that did the budgeting with me, everything from soup to nuts, to help me become a homeowner, and that's what makes me pay it forward. So I do have a little bit of the real story. I'm the poster child.
I see,
Yes,
I
sir.
see. What part of New York were you living in?
South Bronx, Fort Apache.
Lord have mercy. Yeah, you said that with arrogance and aggression. I see. I'm not going to ask you anything. My God, I don't know why you're mad at me, but I'm just here.
Wait. And Dr. Dyson, and I gave you the story.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You did give the story, that South Bronx story. Yes, sir, Doc.
So I finished seminary at Vanderbilt Divinity School in Nashville, Tennessee, and as most seminarians, you come out, theoretically proficient, practically illiterate, and pastoring a church founded in 1866. There was an incredible history in Mount Zion Church of men and women who owned businesses up and down Jefferson Street, Fisk University Corridor, Meharry. You're familiar with all that.
Right.
And their great grandchildren were deacons of mine who single-handedly walked me into banks and helped me understand the financial system, the mortgage system. I was very blessed as a young pastor, 3 years in, to own my first home, and I understood the power of village, and that's why I'm so passionate now about the church's role in moving this needle forward.
Very good, very good. Deacons hooking you up, walking you into the building. I mean, if you got that, you're set. And that's a beautiful thing. And that means, of course, that village is extremely important, helping others, assisting others to do what we don't necessarily know to do ourselves. And the deacons have been acting pretty good since then, all right? Yeah, 'cause some of them be crazy. I'm just the ones that put me out. But don't worry about that. After I preached a sermon that morning, and then they put me out. They said, there's a problem in the church. I said, what's that? They said, it's you. I'm not lying. Anyway, but no bitterness. Deacons are great sometimes. Yes, sir, Reverend.
First home was in Inglewood, California, Imperial and Crenshaw area.
Very promising. Very promising.
Yes. And it was on sale it was up for $103,000. And didn't have.
What year was that?
That was in 1983.
Okay, you're rich.
1980. And didn't have money, so we did an FHA, which was a 5% down. Didn't have the 5% down, and there was a African-American black realtor by the name of Royal Heiser. Light-skinned brother like you.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. I mean, wow. I'll reserve judgment and comment, sir.
I know it's coming. And he taught us about a no money down deal.
Right.
And we didn't understand it. My wife and I didn't understand it. And he said, try to find some seller financing. So we went to the African American who owned the home, and we said, you have this much equity in your home. Would you mind financing the 5%? We promise we'll not only pay you back, but we'll do the rest. And he said, yeah. And we were able to move into the home. Truth be told, complete transparency, while I was a preacher, my wife is a graduate of Chicago University Law School, so all I had to do was sign the paper. She read everything else.
Yeah. Like most preachers taking advantage of women. So, and yes, it is true, I'm light-skinned, and I understand, but Drake and Steph Curry are trying to bring back light-skinned Negroes, so understand our plight and predicament. But my daddy was blue-black, sir, from Georgia, Albany, Georgia, so I saw the demonization and dehumanization he received from black people, right? Assuming I was smart because I was curly-headed and light-skinned, and assuming he was dumb because he was dark-skinned. So I knew that, all jokes aside, from the inside. So I don't mind being in exile for the last 25 years while Idris Elba and Denzel and Wesley Snipes, though he's been to jail, now redeemed. As Drake said, light skin, still a dark nigga.
Oh, you know that.
Yes, sir.
I think you've already told my story when you start talking about preachers, and God bless the man that has his own.
Yes, sir.
My
Yes.
father, we had a lot of children in our home. My father never wanted us to stay in a parsonage.
Mhm.
He told us the value as we were growing up, own your own place. And that was the primary thing. He didn't know a lot about savings or any of those other things, the sophistication. But he said, own your own place. Your house is what you start off with. So at 19, I bought my first house, $27,000. My father, even though he gave that good advice, his word to all of the boys was that you have, if $100 won't solve your emergency, you need not come by here. And you only have 2 times to come by here for that, you know. And so we didn't ever have to go by for $100. But did I know everything about it? No, I didn't know anything about interest rates. So later on, I found out that I was being taken advantage of. But but it was still a good lesson, because ever since then I've been buying houses because my father taught me that, if nothing else.
Yes, sir. Very good. Powerful. That's a powerful story. The preacher's here. You're doing a great job. Did you borrow from your wife or anything?
No, she borrowed from me, though.
Oh, okay. Responsible patriarchy. I like that.
Indeed.
Very good. Yes, sir. Dr. Steele.
Thank you, Michael. I think I'm a pass.
Your drug dealing past notwithstanding, sir. Go ahead.
I've been knowing Mike a long time. Good friend, and I'm enjoying myself. But Mike, it's pretty similar with me like it was with you, Bishop. My family's in the funeral home business still.
Oh, my God.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I debated if I was going to tell you that or not.
Dead Negroes live options.
But I had that exposure of business because my daddy, who was not a high school graduate, anything, he was firm about business. And I observed him and watched him. Then I became one of the first black city councilmen in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and ultimately a state senator, first since Reconstruction in Tuscaloosa. Other point, that was the first point. I discovered as an elected official, I'm bringing and putting it on politics. I discovered there were folks in public housing who could afford monthly payments on a mortgage. They just didn't have the down payment.
Yep.
Hello?
Right.
They didn't have, they were paying $500, $600, $700, $800 a month in public housing. So I went around this young lady who nobody really paid much attention several years ago, many years ago. And she said, "Still, I understand that you want to help your folks in home ownership." I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "What can you do?" She said, "There's some money sitting over here that nobody knew about. That's in the city bank. It's another account nobody knew about because I've been here a long time. And you can use that money for the people that you want to help and defer the down payment and let the city do it." I went and proposed it to the city council. They agreed. And now there are 22 houses called Charles Steele Estate.
Amen.
In Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Go ahead,
So what am I saying? What am I saying? You have to be non-traditional. Talking about being out of the box. Hell, tear the box up. Tear it up. I don't go by the rules of tradition.
Right.
You got to have a vision. I'm going to close with this, Michael. Helen Keller said, you got to have a vision.
Right.
Helen.
Baptist.
It is Baptist. Pass the plate, dog.
Helen Keller, who from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, you know it. You know the story. At 18 months old, she had scarlet fever, which created a disability for her with her sight and her hearing. And she couldn't see and couldn't hear. Someone asked her one day, and she finished college, got a master's degree, great writer. Someone asked her one day, "What is worse than being blind?" She responded, "Not having vision."
Right.
Woo! I never forgot that, and particularly being from Alabama. Man, I got vision of the world. We can't be stopped. So that's what I used to get those houses. That's what I did to save SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Paid it off $3.5 million before, when everybody saying we were going out of business, before we moved in, it was paid off. That's right. And the other thing I heard somebody say, relationship, came from that side. You got to work at relationships. And you got to sell your vision to other folks without the vision. And guess what? You got to have integrity. Honesty and integrity. Too many of us want to be in these positions, but we don't have the honesty and the integrity. Thank you, sir, so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. You had the room until you mentioned honesty and integrity, sir. It was... Wow, we have to have that too, huh? It's rough. Thank you. No, that's brilliant, Dr. Steele.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, for our final comment before we get in.
Those were some strong comments to have to respond to, since I don't think he ever told us about his first house.
He's a preacher. He doesn't get to the point.
but I will tell you about my first house, because
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Dr. Steele, what about your first house? Right quick. Did you have one?
After I moved out the apartment, after I discovered that I had relationships at the bank. Hello, I didn't have no down payment.
Okay, cut it
And
off
I got
right
my
there.
and I've been
Cut it
married
off right
42 years.
Cut it off right there. Relationship at the bank.
Yes, sir.
No down payment. I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't know what the statute of limitations are out here. Gotcha. Okay, good.
That was 42 years ago.
Doc, they will put a Negro in jail for 100 years. Right?
Thank you, Michael.
All right, well, my story of my first house, I was a very young attorney, which is obviously a long time ago, practicing here in Washington, D.C., and I thought I was smart and knew what I was doing. I knew I had 10% down. I could get a 10% down payment, and back then you had to pay private mortgage insurance if you didn't have the 20% down payment. I was prepared for all that. So I got the house, bought the house, ready to close. They send me the closing documents. They send me something and it says, closing costs. What is that?
Right.
What is that? But it was several $1,000s. What is that? I said, oh no. So my wife and I ended up having to take advances on all our credit cards to get the cash available. I thought I was good with the down payment. I didn't know about closing costs. So we ended up getting cash advances on all our credit cards to get the house closed. So it was.
I see. How old were you?
I was. Oh, let me see. This is what I was 29.
29. You had credit cards then, huh? Yeah, that's great. So no, that's a powerful story right here in D.C.
Yeah, in the suburbs, Tacoma Park, Maryland.
Oh yes, sir. All right, good. Well, those are great stories. I mean, in all honesty, tremendous insight. Because even if you're smart and you got capability and you got professional pedigree, it's often difficult to try to figure out what's going on here. It's not just so-called unenlightened, untutored, unlettered people. All of us have had to struggle in terms of home ownership. Now, let me get right to the point here, because I know we've spent quite a bit of time here. I want to turn to Ms. Rice and Reverend Steele just very briefly in terms of fair housing enforcement, because as you well know, housing discrimination has not stopped. Official and legal barriers have been removed. Ostensibly, prohibitions have been eviscerated, taken away, destroyed, but the reality is, the bottom line is, there are still problematic procedures in place that keep people from getting, especially black people and people of color, from getting housing in the U.S. Can you identify one recommendation that you would have, just very briefly, to fight housing discrimination in the U.S.? Dr. Steele and then Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Michael. I can't address that without saying this, that racism is worse today than it was 50 years ago. And many of us don't want to admit that. When 2013, Michael, June 2013, this is everything, of the 1965 Voter Rights Act, when Section 4 and Section 5 was gutted, that's everything in terms of freedom and justice and equality for all of us of color, black, brown, even poor white people. So my point is, if we don't deal with the core of the issue, we will forever be behind the 8 ball and will forever be struggling. The core of the issue, number one, is racism. Number two, I'm closing. Number two is the fact that you don't reinvent the wheel. We gone full circle. How did we get to where we are to be as successful to a large degree than we were for many of years? It's the fact that we collaborated. We worked together. We wasn't out to be on real TV or to be on prime time. We were serious and was willing to sacrifice our lives for the civil rights movement. Let me say this and I'm closing. Politics can't free us. The civil rights movement got to free politics. Because there are people who, and I was elected for 18 years. I was just one of the crazy ones. I went to jail, demonstrating, marching, all of that. But I'm not saying that others need to do that. But the point being is that we rely too much on politics and not the power from within ourselves, and particularly with faith-based.
Okay. All right. Very good. No. Very, very powerful. 2 closings. That was amazing. All right. that was good, Doc. That was good. That was good. Ms. Rice.
Thank you for the question. There are over 4 million instances of housing discrimination that occur each and every year. We are about to release the 2019 Fair Housing Trends Report at the National Fair Housing Alliance, which will show an uptick in the number of housing discrimination complaints. Hate-based housing discrimination complaints are on the rise. Where a person lives, your residency, it's the #1 place where racial hate incidents occur. And so if we are going to fight back against housing discrimination, we have to have the resources to do that. And what the Trump administration has been busy doing is dismantling the Fair Housing Act. There is an effort underway right now. The Trump administration has proposed a new regulation to amend the disparate impact rule that was put in place under the Barack Obama administration. This rule would make it impossible to bring a disparate impact claim. We're leading the effort to fight back. We need 100,000 comments speaking about cooperation and collaboration. We need everybody in this room. We need all of your organizations, and we need you as an individual to submit comments. Just visit our website. It's a dedicated website, defendcivilrights.org. If you go there, you'll find all the information that you need. But and I have to thank NAREB, because NAREB is a long-standing partner in the fight for fair housing. NAREB is the first fair housing organization to exist in the United States. And NAREB has always joined with us to push back against efforts to dismantle the Fair Housing Act and other civil rights laws. So please join with us in this effort to defend disparate impact. We've been using disparate impact for almost 50 years. We use it to fight insurance redlining. We use it to fight lending redlining. We use it to fight discrimination against women who are on maternity leave, women who are victims of sexual violence. We use disparate impact in so many ways, and we must preserve this important civil rights tool, which is a legacy, as you've mentioned, of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, ma'am.
Defendcivilrights.org.
Right. Beautiful. Very powerful. Thank you. Let me turn to President Williams and Ms. Saunders. So we know that there is remaining concern, right? Persistent concern about mortgage insurance existing throughout the life of a loan. So given the fact, of that very specific situation, do y'all believe it has a negative impact on black borrowers? I mean, is there some, speaking of disparate impact, what's the impact on black borrowers?
I believe that it does have a negative impact. Prior to some years ago, when you received 80% equity in your home, you were able to knock off or reduce or eliminate the MIP, or the private mortgage insurance. Now that option is no longer available for FHA borrowers. And African Americans, black people, use FHA more than conventional. So therefore, it has a direct impact. We need to politic, we need to discuss. It needs to be at the table that the PMI, MIP needs to be off the table after 80% equity, just like conventional loans.
I'm in agreement with that. I'm in agreement with that. I can't really add any more to that. We use that as a tool to be able to lift that requirement, and so I agree that it needs to be reinstituted.
But I think also we need to make sure that the black church has an opportunity to weigh in with you on that. Because if we don't, then I think you don't bring in the full massive opportunity that you have within the black church.
Okay. Let me stick with Ms. Saunders and then bring in Tristan Bro as well. So can you identify one barrier and one solution to black people obtaining an affordable and sustainable mortgage loan then? I mean, just whatever, you know, what comes to the first couple of things that come to your mind?
So I think we've already kind of touched on that. One of the critical barriers is the lack of down payment assistance, the lack of access to capital for that equity component that's required. And then one of the solutions, I think, again, goes to collaboration. I think we really need to come together and figure out how do we pool funds and create funds, and the church could be one mechanism to do that, that would allow for access to down payment assistance for those that don't have easy access to that opportunity. And one of the things that our association members do, we're very creative, we're very entrepreneurial. Again, the National Bankers Association is the trade association for minority banks in the country. And the FDIC has continuously shown, both in 2014 and 2019, that our banks are more present, our banks are making access to home mortgages more available, and so strengthening our minority banks and strengthening our ties to organizations that are around the table and being creative and thinking outside of the box as to how do we come together to collaborate and help ourselves to give access to that equity component would eliminate some of the barrier concerns.
All right, Brother Bro.
I echo everything that Lisa said, but I will also say that that's my same grandfather who left me his house. He had a third grade education, and he parked cars in New York, in Queens, for individuals who didn't look like him. He did it for 23 years so he can save to purchase his home in South Carolina. That was his vacation home and his retirement home. He said it was going to do both at the same time. But one of the things that my grandfather, in all of his perfect ways, instilled in me that was negative, that I had to get over, but I had to realize it was him, it was his fear of going into a loan office as a black man and sitting across the table from a white man, and the fear of that white man telling him that he did not qualify. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers that that we have, is just that misnomer that you're going to be denied. And how we educate the public is going to be important. As it relates to policy, millennials have to deal with the crushing barrier of student loans. If I'm paying $1,000 a month in student loans, as well as paying rent in Washington, D.C., that's $2,300 a month if you live in a shoebox. There is no possible way that you can save, not even for a down payment, just closing costs and just the things that come with purchasing a home. And so I think that we have to educate our community of opportunity, of resources, removing the barrier, the misnomers that are out there, but also pushing our legislators to address this holistically and not just in housing, but in discrimination or in education or veterans who are dealing with issues as well. Every single agency has to deal with housing America, and I think we have to push that.
Okay, no, perfect. So let me bring in Ms. Calloway, Brother Thompson, Bishop Walker, and Ms. Menza. Let me ask you this question in terms of down payment assistance. So what should we do to make certain that we get more funding at the local, state, and federal level, and the private sector for down payment assistance for black homeowners? I mean, it's a critical problem. You know, when we were hearing about people in public housing who, if they just had a down payment, wouldn't have to be stuck in these dead-end arrangements that financially drain them and render them incapable of saving any money, as Brother Bro said, and then moving ahead. So can y'all just briefly address that?
Yeah, I'll start off. A couple of things that I've been involved with in Atlanta is a private-public partnership. Did a down payment assistance program with Fair Housing Alliance, and we were taking money that was non-traditional out of the box. And in other cities, they even had money that came in various ways through other bank situations they had, and even leveraged that money like dollar for dollar, going to getting foundation money, other entities, nonprofits coming together, putting that money into a pool so that we would be able to offer down payment assistance to people who would not traditionally be able to get maybe a government or state or county down payment assistance programs. And so we have to definitely look at various ways to pool money together to offer different kinds of programs with heavy education involved, so we have sustainability. The other concern I have around down payment assistance, because I am a practitioner, I'm a real estate broker, is that we do have a large segment of the population that would not even qualify for down payment assistance. They make 100% or above AMI, but they are cash poor, and they would not be able to save for down payment assistance, yet even if there were a program, they wouldn't qualify. So we have to do, again, out of the box, that we're able to take care. Many of those will be millennials who are making the 100,000 but don't have even the 3.5% down payment that it would require, because they may have the student loan and then the car, and then you just don't have the amount of money to save $10,000, $20,000. So we have to look at down payment assistance programs that will deal with the 100 plus 120% AMI as well. And then third thing we have to deal with is we have to stay on top of HUD to not come up with these legislations that they want to outlaw, basically, down payment assistance if it's anything outside of the governmental box. So we already went through that for the last couple of months where we almost were not able to use a couple of programs out here I won't name, that would be able to assist those who really were above the 100% AMI. They weren't really income driven as well. So we need to have a variety of types of down payment assistance programs. And again, I'm speaking as boots on the ground, what we need for our variation of clients out here, potential clients.
Okay, now explain to us, is AMI, that's NAACP, SCLC,
Sorry.
what's that?
Area of median income.
Oh,
so
yeah, okay.
That's what that means. Area of median income, so in every metropolitan area, there'll be a decision about how much of the median income is for a family. And so when we do down payment assistance, typically it's available for those who make 80% of that area's income, which would not be basically your teacher, you wouldn't go to your firefighters, your first responders, or any of your regular middle income folk would not qualify, yet they would be cash poor. So when I say 100% AMI, meaning those that make whatever that medium income is, or maybe 20% above, which again, we're still talking about folks that are working, a lot of times check to check.
Thank you, I just wanted to clear that up. Just asking for a friend. Down with OPP, AMI, we're just trying to get that right, okay.
Dr. Dyson,
Yes,
can I
ma'am.
just say parenthetically, the money that we made available to Michelle's group to provide that down payment assistance came from the Wells Fargo settlement. So our discrimination case against Wells Fargo, which was bought under a disparate impact claim that provided that $30 million that we used throughout the country, that's where those funds came from.
Right.
Oh, that's getting your money back, huh, from Wells Fargo. That's like Denny's contributing to the meal plan for Negroes. That's powerful, right? And it's critical because the Wells Fargo situation caught a lot of black people out there, right, in terms of exploiting through subprime mortgage scandal that bled off that wealth, and at least making some recycling of those funds possible. Restitution, yes, ma'am. Even reparation.
A little bit.
Jesus. On the AMI. You down with AMI? Yeah,
Down
you know.
with the AMI.
You know, I'm down with that now. I'm going to use that term at least 5 times in the next 10 minutes. Bishop Walker.
Well, let me just back up if I can for a moment. We were talking earlier at the table about I think the exhaustion that millennials experience. I'm in a city epicenters, Meharry Medical College. These kids graduate with extraordinary amounts of debt, and they look at this idea of, why would I take on even more?
That's right.
For us, it's twofold. For us, practically in the church, it is creating an opportunity where within the life of the church, you actually have access to these resources. You know, we want to be able to be a pipeline where people can know where the money is, number one. Number two is, this may be just a pebble in the water, but for us, it's about establishing endowments in our church, whereby the church itself can recycle money to help folks who go through these programs. If it's $5,000 for 20 people, that's a little more we can do. And so for us, it's something that we are planning to do in 2020 to try to help with the assistance. We've got to understand the rules and how that works, you know, because you don't want to put people in a bad situation. But I do think that it is important for us in the church and to work. You talked earlier about community and partnerships, to be the place when folks come out of our church to go right into a space where here are the resources. Don't leave fellowship, but here are the resources right here for you to know where the money is. And so for us, it's really about that. I'm all about access, and I'm all about putting the information in folks' hands. You know, in our ministry, if you join our church, you got to vote. You got to register to vote at the same time. So for us, it's also the same thing, you know, in terms of these kinds of things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump?
I'd love to get in on this,
Yes.
Dr. Dyson, because the topic of down payment assistance takes us right into the mortgage. And that is a big chunk of why we have these very low rates of home ownership. But I represent the nation's community development financial institutions. They're community banks, they're loan funds, they're community development venture capital associations, they're microfinance funds. All of these institutions are what I think of as mission lenders. Lenders who want to hold these mortgages, lenders who want to do a kind of lending, which is, I'll go to you, Brother Steele, tear up the box lending, who don't have to follow a set finance box. And so, in part, we need this class of institution to survive, and that are our community institutions. That's a piece of this. But one piece of getting people into houses is also, is there a house to buy? And that's something that I don't think we can touch just with the mortgage. And that's another consequence of post-recession America, that the development of affordable housing stock has largely been done by non-market driven actors. So many of our community development financial institutions are in the financing business of the stock of the next generation of houses, some of them with a great resilience and sustainability feature. They're net zero houses. But if we don't invest in our alternative producers of homes, we're also not going to tackle this homeownership crisis. And that does exist in native areas, in rural areas, and in parts of the city where you don't see the developers rush in. There's been an unevenness to the creation of stock. It is why community development financial institutions get up in the morning. They want to be in those markets. They're not chasing return. The first houses to be built will be offered at $800,000 and $900,000 and $700,000 in markets. That's what, it's a supply that's been held back. So I want to, if we're talking about getting people into a house, a fair mortgage and a fair mortgage lender is a piece of that. But we do have to look at the availability and affordability of stock. We're not going to let our politicians out of that. That is part of this question.
Right.
We have to heal what happened in the recession. So much, all these foreclosures. And I know, my friend, this has had a cost on our communities. We don't have the stock to get people in those starter homes. So that is what my network actually wants to do. Some actually produce and develop the housing. So I think that's a piece of this debate.
That's right.
Well, may I weigh in?
Yeah,
on it?
sure.
The concern that we have, certainly our church has, when I was in Los Angeles, we were the first CDFI for the state, faith-based CDFI for the state. And we
What's
had
CDFI?
Community Development Financial Institution, big umbrella.
The CDFI offers banks several incentives. One, a tax credit and a tax, certainly an enhanced CRA grading. And we're working with the, and we also receive funds that we may manage. And we were able to raise about $100 million. And out of those funds, We also work with the city of Los Angeles to develop down payment assistance programs. From that, we started developing housing, and we started our own loan brokerage firm within the church. And the loan brokerage firm certainly had the responsibility of teaching the members of our church the responsibility of owning a home. And I got good news. We were able to create 400 new homeowners as a result of that program. Here's the tension. For me, the tension in the text is we have gentrification is coming in. It's certainly a two-edged sword. In some cases, it benefits those African Americans who own it and are able to sell it and make some property. But we have some developers coming into our communities which are buying low and developing high and moving low to moderate income people right out of their community. And we believe that we need to consolidate, gather, partner with the church to bring our resources together and not allow our communities to be bought up by these venture capitals, these helixes, and coming in and sweeping in and making tons of money, displacing our people, and then certainly making draconian profits at the expense of poor people.
All right, no, very powerful. Brother Thompson, let me bring you in on this one as well. So we know that Congress and the White House continue to discuss $1 to $2 trillion infrastructure bill. We never hear about what the particular specifics are in regard to our communities. Do you think, and I'll ask you this, and then maybe Brother Bro, the construction and reconstruction of single-family homes for owner-occupants will be included in the infrastructure bill, because that has a significant impact on African-American people.
Yes, thank you. So if we don't advocate and agitate, that won't happen. The Democrats, when Trump first got in, talked about that this might be something they can work on. They were talking about roads and bridges and sewer systems and things of that nature. And then there was a talk about parks and playgrounds. And so for us, we need to be talking about investing in efforts that's going to deal with the inventory crisis, deal with the ability to train more African Americans in the real estate management and development space, so that we can control more land and develop the land that's in our community. So I think if we fight for it, Maxine Waters and Elizabeth Warren have been pushing to make sure that subject of housing reconstruction, housing rehabilitation is in a particular infrastructure bill. But if the people in this room don't demand it, it won't happen. And that's going to require our efforts at the local, state, and federal level. And I want to just say this, being as Pastor Steele, Minister Steele, like him, being a former city council member and state senator as well out of New York, upstate Buffalo, one thing most people don't understand is that HUD policies are impacted the most at the local level. A lot of times people want to go to Washington first, but the reality is, for those who've been in public life, know that Washington, the mayor and the local congressman actually controls what happens in that local marketplace. So if you want new ideas to happen, you go to your local HUD office, and they will come up with ideas. They will help identify funding, and they will work with your local mayor, council member, and member of Congress to actually bring new programs. So there's got to be a dual strategy. You got to push hard at the top, but if you want real change to happen, it happens at the local level. Every municipality in the country particularly most major cities, get community development block grant funds and other funding, and that's all managed at the local level. And if you're not engaged at that level, going to Washington is nice, but the real change happens on the ground. And it's easier to get that local HUD office to move than it is trying to get this bureaucracy on 7th Street to move. So I think the long story short, it can happen, when we got to fight for it. We got to demand for housing money the same way rich people demanded for that tax cut.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I just wanted to jump in from what Antoine was talking about with respect to housing as infrastructure, and that, you know, everyone goes to the bridges and the roads and the public spaces and doesn't and if at all they talk about housing is infrastructure, they'll talk about, I think what jumps into people's minds is large-scale multifamily housing. When single-family housing is, no matter where you are in the country, with very few exception, the predominant form of housing in this country. And the investment level that goes into single-family housing production, but where our organization focuses our efforts is mostly on the restoration of vacant properties into productive use. And so I think we need to be talking about strategies that allow communities to bring these properties back, because who in this room doesn't either have a vacant house on their block or know someone who lives on a block with a vacant house on their block or more? And the impact that that has on a community and on the fabric of a neighborhood. There's one legislative proposal that I know Lisa Rice has been involved in since the very beginning of the fight that is now actually been introduced in the House. It's called the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, NHIA. There's a website, neighborhoodhomesinvestmentact.org. It's a little cumbersome, but what that is, it's a tax credit to try and incentivize the development of and redevelopment of single-family housing stock in very targeted communities. So this is designed specifically not to help people in already gentrifying areas maximize the profits that they're already trying to make. This is targeted at giving private investors an opportunity to fill the gap between what it would cost to actually acquire and then rehab that home versus what it would cost to actually buy it once it's done. The appraisal gap is real, and it is in a lot of communities and a lot of Black communities specifically, where you can buy a home for $20,000 in a lot of cities in Ohio, for example. You still have to put $80,000 in that house to get it to a place where you would want any family that you care about living in it. And if you can't sell that house for more than $60,000 turnkey ready, no developer is going to work with that. And so this tax credit proposal is targeted specifically at that appraisal gap. The developer takes all the risk. Yep. So at the end of the day, if all of a sudden by the time they're done with that project, it is in a gentrifying area, they don't get the credit. So there are a lot of mechanisms in place. A lot of people way smarter than myself were involved in the creation of this very sort of surgical tool. But when we're talking about infrastructure and housing as infrastructure, it is already introduced in the House in a bipartisan way by Representative Kelly from Erie and Representative Higgins from the Buffalo Niagara area. So I encourage people to talk about that. You are the people who should be talking about that because you care about real estate and you care about neighborhoods. And I think it can have a real impact in a lot of communities that are struggling to turn themselves around and struggling to turn their markets around.
Can I just add one other piece to that? So the other thing that we often don't talk about why we need more African American builders, why we need more African Americans doing rehab work in our communities, because it impacts jobs and families. Yep. Every person who becomes a homeowner, about 12 to 15 careers are impacted by one real estate transaction. And then the families, as a result of purchasing that home, they have higher life expectancy rate. They typically do better in school. They're less likely to get in trouble. Yep. And many of them, and over 40% of all small business owners start their business in the home. So when we sometimes talk about this moral imperative, but we also need to talk about this economic imperative related to home ownership as well. And, I know from being in the industry 8 years, it's good when I can be able to tell a client, I got 2 or 3 property inspectors you can talk to. I got 2 or 3 roofers you can work with. I got 2 or 3 landscapers or 2 or 3 plumbers or 2 or 3 people that can help you with your concrete or do your driveway. And that's the other missing piece of the real estate ownership that black people miss out when you have a 30% gap, right? So if you take that gap, you're going to talk about the kids not only going to college, but you're also going to talk about all these black-owned businesses that are less in value and have less employees, and we impact that every transaction as well. Sometimes we kind of overshadow that. But I also want us to always remember that we impact people's bottom lines and give people the opportunity to say, that young man was working for you part-time. Now I sold 10 houses, and Mr. Williams can now make sure he can work the whole summer. Because I got 5 clients that need painting done on their house. I got a few that need siding done on their home before the house is even ready to be on the market. So that's the other part I think we need to talk about for this infrastructure and reconstruction that can take place in cities across. We could put black men and women to work on these. In Detroit, they have over 20,000 properties in the land bank.
Yeah.
Vacant houses.
Right. And that's my city. Dan Gilbert owns a lot of them houses that are not, right, not those, but in terms of, second to the state, the greatest amount of homes are owned by a private citizen. And what that does to the demographics and the geography, the geopolitics of any urban space are pretty dramatic. And all of this stuff we're talking without the push and pull of politics on the one hand and the financial institutional considerations on the other, I think is extremely important. But what we know is in each community is a church. So let's talk a bit about the faith-based initiatives. We know that in 2000, and I want to start with Brother Williams, Reverend Dr. Williams first, and then stretch it out to the other more traditional bishops and ministers here. We know that in 2015, NAREB, created the 2 million new black homeowners in 5 years program to MN5. I'm just learning these new things. AMI, NAACP, the whole thing. It's great. So CFI, right? I thought that stood for chocolate, folks, investments. LMI. Low moderate income. DOPE, right? So one of the components of the program includes a faith-based initiative designed to collaborate with churches to increase black home ownership. Reverend Whitlock spoke brilliantly to some of these issues. How can the NAREB partner with faith-based organizations and other nonprofits to achieve the goal of expanded black home ownership? That's pretty fundamental.
Well, NAREB is looking to go into partner with, to collaborate with not only our faith-based organizations, but all of our civic groups, the Masons, the Elks, the Sorors, the Frats, NAN, NAACP, Urban League, which I believe we have representatives in here today.
You forgot one.
Did I forget one? I'm sorry. SCLC.
Mr.
You're top on my list.
I know it.
We are, yeah. So we are looking, no, I said Nan. We are partnering, we're looking to partner to form a collaborative effort so that when a member of those organizations, which will undoubtedly sell, move, or buy, okay, that they will be using a realtist. Like Mr. Thompson said, that dollar, basically what he's saying, that dollar needs to circulate. So we are going to be the economic catapult to begin that conversation. We've already developed or partnered with the company to develop and have that technology. It'll be a direct economic impact to that nonprofit, whether it's faith-based or whatever nonprofit it is, along with NAREB, which will begin to impact the country.
That's great.
Nice.
That's where we're going with it.
Okay. All right. Any of the other, okay, yes.
You go first.
Bishop. Part of the motivation in all of this is because of the fact that if we are going to preach a gospel of social change and social relevance, we've got to be at the cutting edge, continue to be at the cutting edge of saying to people that the only Mercedes out on the parking lot cannot be the preacher's car. It has to be that we are empowering the people to be all that they are supposed to be in Jesus' name. Economics, the whole of the economics for the black community, though we speak of a different echelon now. But the basic thing that got us to where we are is home ownership. Well, before we did anything else, we were taught, as my father taught us, don't let anybody put you out of your house. Not only do you need to buy one, but you need to hurry up and get it paid for, because that's your ticket. That's your ticket to moving to the next level. And so that's a social gospel in Jesus' name right there, because it controls the whole of the black economic experience. When you talk about home ownership, you talk about most of the businesses that start in the black community start with a mortgage, a second mortgage on that house. When you talk about putting your child through school, if you don't have the wherewithal, you talk about putting a second mortgage on that house. When you start talking about the whole idea of medical emergencies, you talk about putting a second mortgage on that house. So mortgages and home purchasing is a bank in our community. We ought to be teaching our people that before you buy the car, you ought to be talking about the house. Ride the bus until you get the house. Don't be in the project and got the Cadillac sitting out there in front of the project. You know, have the house. You know, you shouldn't wear the cuts of clothing that you wear with designer clothing until you can afford to put your clothes in a closet that belongs to you. And so it really does make a whole lot of sense, and a gospel that we ought to be preaching is good stewardship. If we are going to preach the relevance of the gospel, home ownership is a part of that.
Bishop, you heard the word crap. You said we ought to own the house and then the car.
And then the car.
We have an entire initiative built around just that, house-then-the-car.com. It's an initiative because there's 1.7 million black millennials that make over $100,000 a year that do not own a house. That's a violation. We're here to help fix that problem.
What's the number again?
1.7 million black millennials that make over $100,000 a year that do not own a home.
Wow. Did they go to your church?
You didn't know that?
Yeah, right. Take up that offering. That is a lot.
We're attempting to partner at these different venues with our faith-based and what have you, so that we can educate. Okay, we're gonna have similar panels like this across the country. It's not only an initiative, but this right here, what you're witnessing today, is a movement. Thank you.
I think we're being held to a greater standard. Thank you for the work that you do and the partnership that we enjoy and look forward to continuing to move forward with. I think, and Bishop, thank you for that, because as you was talking, I was thinking about, it really does become kind of theological malpractice for us not to address this from that perspective. And I think when you really look at how our theology and how our understanding of Scripture plays out, even the New Testament, much of the faith that we enjoy today, they were able to do that breaking bread from house to house. Home ownership was a part of, the first century model of Christianity, and for us to preach it and then be okay with people not owning a home, to us, I think it's ludicrous. So I'm excited about it, and I just want to say that because I think it's something, the mandate is there, and I think that we are at this table, Michael, because we really believe very strongly in the need for this partnership and the faith-based community to really step up and do what we need to do.
That's Black Homiletics for you 101. Jesus, he just thinking, hey, they went from house to house. Home ownership as the predicate of the gospel. Oh, Lord. Yeah, I mean, and right, if you can't live in that car, get your crib first before you get your car. You know what I'm saying? And before you have a place to stash your drugs, I mean, from the apothecary. What are you speaking of, people? I'm talking about opioids, right? I'm talking about at the pharmacy, right? Not on the street. Let's raise it up a little bit. Although, whatever you have, right, that you've invested in, if you can't put your car in your garage at your home, right? The home doesn't go into your car, the car goes into your home. So it is critical before you buy that Popeye sandwich.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Don't get anything out of it.
I'm just saying, I've had if anybody here had a chance to testify about that sandwich, that's good, right? It was all right. But the point is, and it's not either or, you can get the sandwich and the car and the crib, but it is important to have a priority. What is striking to me about the millennials, though, 1.7 millennials who make $100,000 who ain't got no crib, right? Instead of cancel culture, trying to cancel each other, cancel that debt, and engage yourself in the procurement of a home. That is a critical lesson, though, because that does become the gateway to so much else that we've been denied. Anybody, Reverend Steele, you want to jump
30
in?
seconds.
30 seconds?
I said I wasn't going to say it because it's really exciting and you're going to like it. And we can collaborate, Mr. President. And thank you, Doctor. And thank you, Mr. President, for being here. I just had a meeting, collaborative meeting, in Panama City. Many people don't know about, or they have forgotten, Hurricane Michael. Devastated the black community. People living out on the street in tents. No churches, no schools, no libraries. In Panama, I didn't say Panama City Beach.
Right.
It's already been restored. I'm talking about the black community. So what I did took me about 8 months. It'll be a year next month that Hurricane Michael came through there. But I started in Chicago, and I started in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Illinois, because I spoke at a convention with the Federal Home Loan Bank executives. I said, oh my Lord, sent me by the CEO because I'm out of the box. The point being is that after negotiation for 7-8 months, I had a coming to Jesus meeting, bishops, in Panama City last month. And I had 20 banks there. And to announce that the Federal Home Loan Bank, which started in 1933, a lot of folks don't even know about them. And they got stakeholders. You know what the stakeholders are? Other banks. They have $50 million to spend. Hello, somebody. Or should I? My time is up.
That's all right, Doc. Yeah, no, that's
I'm
great.
telling you something that's tangible. I'm all about getting the job done, results, not philosophizing the results.
That's it.
So we have 20 banks down there that's working with the citizenry, Mr. President, because what we need to know, there's always another storm coming.
Yeah.
Just had one. Always another storm. This Esther relief is what I created in SCLC. Because those storms keep coming, they're going to keep on coming. And when you don't have no money, that's another storm. When you don't have access to capital, that's a storm. So what I've done, I got a partnership with the Federal Home Loan Bank and their stakeholders just for Panama City.
Yes, sir.
In the black community. So once we spend that $50 million, hello somebody, there's another $50 million after the first of the year.
Right.
To build and to institutionalize home ownership and black wealth in the black community. But you can't do it if you don't work together.
All right.
I lied to him. I told him I had all the black community behind me. I had all the churches behind me. I said, I'm going to speak at the National Convention, all of them. And they already told me that they're going to support me. They said, we'll have the meeting.
That's right.
You got to give that imagery that we are together. That's right. And start trying to showboat and take the lead and think your organization is the only one. We are nothing without each other. Now rest my case.
That's all right.
We're nothing without each other.
Federal Home Loan Bank is in the room.
I need to meet him.
Mac is in the room.
Freddie Mac.
I'm dealing with the Southeast. Now, what district is he over? I'm in the Southeast. San Francisco? Well, I'll be there next week.
And I'm going with you.
I'll be there next week.
And I'm
You
going
go with me.
I'm going with you.
I'm in the Southeast.
You
all
said
over.
collaboration.
Collaboration. There you go.
Now,
He didn't
Hurricane
lie.
Michael is still here.
Yes, sir. Yes, Michael. Still here.
So let me after that thrilling homiletical exercise in conscience raising and consciousness raising, that's very critical. I just want to end. We got 5 minutes left, so I'm begging y'all, take 15 seconds apiece for an impossible question. We talked about the 1.7 black millennials that are mortgage ready but are renting apartments. So let's just put it this way: how can the black media, faith, and community organizations voice the importance of home owning to young black people? Just give me 15 seconds about what we can do as we wrap this up. We'll start on the left over here before we come over to the right.
All right, well, obviously, as the representative of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters, my members are radio and television stations around the country. And if we're going to educate our communities, we have to be using media. Most of our stations, if they're radio stations, they have talk programs. If an AM station, they do talk almost all day long. You know, and I'm sure we can work to figure out how we get the message out. We got, you know, if people want to get on the air, and I think that's a logical way to do it. Right. Then we need to be talking about a collaboration to make that happen. And National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters is here to begin that dialogue.
All right.
You got a convention coming up. Right. 5 seconds. Collaboration, unity, integrity, and honesty.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Doc.
Educate in every way you can, to provide resources where you can, and to celebrate every time there's a buy-in.
All right, Doc.
We formed a group called the Young Billionaires. Although they don't have it now, they will have it in the future. And we bring in people who are doing multi-million-dollar deals to sit down and talk about the mindset that it takes to move in that direction.
Right.
Collaboration, we're better together.
I believe we have to go where they are. We need to be in all the venues and that young people are at. Be there with our education, with our tables. Do not look at them disparagingly. We have to do that. Yeah. And just make sure that we give them an opportunity and listen to them. I think I hear a lot from young people that we don't hear them.
Right.
That we talk at them, not talk to them, and not talk with them. And lastly, we need these conversations in the black community around every table, in every house, at every spades game, every dominoes. We have to begin to start talking every whist game. You have to start talking about the situation, meeting people where they're at. And that's how far down we need to go. I'm not
Jesus
down,
with
but
the woman at the well.
At
the
well.
bid whist game.
At the bid whist
game.
game.
At the bid whist game. All right.
We need to look. NAREB, as I said, is launching this campaign under the 2 million and 5 banner. HouseThenTheCar.com. I need you to take it with you. I need you to take it home. I need you to take it to church. I need you to take it to the meeting, the boardroom, what have you. We need to push this 100%. When you go there, Marcia, how are you? When you go there, you come in, you have, it'll help them to develop their budget. It'll have credit resources. It'll have a bunch of information. Then we're going to partner with the auto industry because student loans is a big issue, but it's really funny. For our people, auto loans. Our young people, auto loans is an issue. So just talk about it. HouseThenTheCar.com. Begin to talk about that. That'll help us move that needle.
He talks about us so much, I think about it all the time. You know, all the time. House, then the car. He's absolutely correct. Let me just say this real quick. We are pushing a bill called the American Dream Down Payment Savings Act. It is similar to the College 529 College Savings Plan, where people of all colors will be able to save up for a home tax-free with some tax advantages. And so we want to push that bill. We need people to get engaged not only on that bill, but also making home ownership a public priority. Some of you may or may not know, home ownership has not been talked about in the last several presidential debates, and there's one on Thursday, right? Outside of the debate stage, all these folks tripping over themselves to talk about black home ownership, but none of them met with NAREB, number one. Number two, have not consulted with us on it. And number three, even the Democratic Party has not put that issue as a debate question about the solutions that they have. So whether at the local level, at the state level, or at the federal level, it's on us. Our forefathers put it on them, it's on us to fight and make sure that people hear our voice. Because collectively, they're gonna come to your churches, some of them are gonna come to all of our neighborhoods, because we are reliable, as Malcolm X would say, we are a reliable vote. But if we allow people to treat us like chumps and don't offer, and we have solutions, right? There's a lot of solutions around this table. But I think all of us need to not just ask, but demand. Because Frederick Douglass said that, we gotta demand. Thank you.
We have to understand that a lot of you and a lot of us in this room know this, that black wealth is tied to black home ownership. And out of that 1.7 million of millennials who are mortgage ready, the first wave of them in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be trying to have a conversation about how they're going to send their kids to school.
That's right.
To college. Think about that. Individuals who have $100,000 in student loan debt themselves are going to start thinking about how they're going to send their kids to school. And so HBCUs are on the decline as it is. Black individuals going to college the numbers are decreasing over time. And so we have to be able to work together to build black wealth, have the conversation with all parties at the table. So I appreciate NAREB and all the work that you're doing. I know that National Housing Conference, I can speak on behalf of them, and we're willing to stand side by side with you to fight this issue. But Proverbs 24 says it best, by wisdom, a house is built.
Amen.
And so we have to have the wisdom, and we have to have the courage, and we have to educate everyone. And if you go a little further in that same 24th chapter of Proverbs, it says, surely you need guidance when you're waging a war. And you have to have advisors. And so we are honored to be here, and we're going to be advisors, and we're going to work to solve this together.
All right, Minister. Reverend Bro. All right.
One thing to remember about the 1.7 million mortgage-ready millennials is that, what percentage of them watched their parents and helped their parents pack when they got foreclosed on 10 years ago? And needing to understand the trauma that can be associated with home ownership, and to be able to repair and do some restorative conversations about that home ownership does not have to end that way, and that it was orchestrated and rigged to end that way, and that we have to do a lot of work together, but making sure that as we're having these conversations that there's room to talk about that and to acknowledge that, and to figure out how to make sure that the mortgage-ready millennials that we're targeting are going in eyes open and in some way at least partially healed from that.
Nice. Thank you.
I'm going to stay with you, Brother Tristan. Without a vision, and I'm going to add a plan, the people perish. I believe we need a bold, comprehensive, united, strategic plan in order to reach 2,000,005. That bold, visionary plan needs to be all-inclusive, it needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to have the backing and the support of everyone at this table, plus all of the partners in the audience and beyond. If we do it and collaboratively, we can address it, because the one thing that we really haven't acknowledged is that the housing and financial system that is in operation today was specifically designed to serve our white brothers and sisters and to exclude us. Right. It was designed to exclude people of color. So it is no question but that the African American homeownership rate is going to continue to decline, because the system wasn't built for us. It wasn't designed for us. So we have to reconstruct the system. We have to overhaul the credit scoring system. We have to overhaul the financial system so that it serves us. It is designed to serve us.
All right.
And the church said amen. Amen.
I'm inspired today by this conversation, and I thank NAREB. I suspect our millennials are not inspired. I suspect that there is trauma. They're smart. They know the jig's up. And I suspect they need a big dose of hope, and that they can be owners, that they can help close the wealth gap. And I think hope comes from success, from collaborations, from seeing it work. And I hope we can be part of a future collaboration that builds back some hope that we can get this done. This is a rich country. We can get this done.
As I think about the millennials, I think it requires each of us to be willing to make a personal sacrifice. If we think about the need for us to create intergenerational wealth so that our kids aren't strapped with the level of student debt that they're having to take on just to get an education, I think we need to look at ourselves and consider what is the call to action. Because it is going to take each and every one of us in order to move this paradigm and in order to wage and be successful at the war that NAREB has called us to. I want to thank NAREB for this opportunity. I want to just remind you that we have institutions that are owned by us, financial institutions that need to be supported and strengthened. Many of us were taken to the bank, opened our first accounts because our mothers and grandmothers said, you will bank here. And therefore that eliminated the intimidation that so many millennials have. So we have to be willing to embrace them, teach them, collaborate, and make ourselves personally accountable so that we can move the next generation forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very kindly. Before we close, let's hear from President Williams, some closing wisdom and insight, and then we'll wrap it up very quickly.
Well, many thanks again to my esteemed to my esteemed conversationalist, Dr. Dyson, the conversation leader, my NAREB leadership team, the staff at the National Press Club, the media press, and you, our guests, for participation in the first national conversation on Black home ownership. As I stated earlier, NAREB believes that home ownership is the key to providing everyone, regardless of race, the opportunity of what home ownership is. We are changing the narrative and shifting the atmosphere. We will educate, empower, and mobilize. We will move the needle on the disturbing rates of Black home ownership. We will proclaim victory in the war on the decline of Black home ownership. I thank you all for coming. We look forward to working with each and every one of you.
Hello, everybody. I think we can do a little bit better than that. What can be accomplished with just a conversation at the table? Do you feel empowered? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I just have a few reminders that this whole week, this is like the precursor for an amazing conference that's taking place not far from here, the Congressional Black Conference. It's an annual event. NAREB has participated many, many years, and that's a continuation for this year as well. We invite you to join us Thursday for our SHEBA Forum. The SHEBA is a acronym for our State of Housing in Black America. The young man that was here at the press conference, Mr. James H. Carr, the curator of that report, the whole and complete report will be unveiled this Thursday at the what is the name of the convention center? Washington Convention Center. Will be in the main stage from 2 to 4. Please be there. Do not miss this opportunity to hear what is going on and to get the data.